I know last week that I said that cheating wasn't a big deal in competitive Warhammer, but events last weekend, maybe they're making me rethink stuff. I don't know. Stay tuned and you'll find out.
My name is Tanya, otherwise known as the War Mistress. I've painted some minis, I've played some games, and I'm on a mission to be nice and roll dice.
All right, people, we're back with another episode of Be Nice and Roll Dice, and I'm back with Val Heffelfinger. Val, how are you doing?
Oh, doing just fine. No particular reason why I would suddenly reappear back to back.
Back to back. It's never happened before. I haven't even had a repeat guest on. So this is a
Well,
first.
these are auspicious times.
That's right.
Unprecedented times. Well, very.
Stop, please.
Some would say precedented. Some would say very precedented
Say
times.
precedented. Last weekend
Uh-huh.
I
What
released
happened?
a
Something happened?
video. No, last weekend I released a video.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, it was a good one. It had
I
it
think
had a lot
if
of
that
traffic
dickhead
on
would
it.
have just, if he would have just stopped chewing gum, it would have been a really great episode. My bad.
Did you watch it? Because I never rewatch it. I just one take, boom, into the video
Why do you
editor.
do this? Why would you do this if not to then listen to yourself talk? Like, isn't that the point?
I thought that
That's
meant
the only
that you were like a psychopath if you liked the sound of your own voice.
shit. Well, I guess I'm holding up the stereotype of the mustache. Just gotta tick all those boxes.
Okay. All right. So, but besides my last video coming out, something else happened last weekend,
Mhm.
and competitive Warhammer 40K people are up in arms.
Yeah, no, the whole town's in a tizzy. It is.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce the story?
I mean, it's a very timely story considering our episode that came out right before.
Sure.
But yeah,
Which was
so
what was it? What to do with cheaters in 40K? Was that the name title of the?
yeah, how to deal with cheaters. This is actually how do we deal with
Hmm.
cheaters part 2.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool.
And then so somebody cheated on stream. Somebody
Straight.
who's very high in the rankings in the ITC.
Mm-hmm.
So were we
Yeah.
were we wrong? Are cheaters actually really common?
No, I still refuse to say that we're wrong, or at least, and that also, by the way, I don't think was the moral of the story. I would say that uh, what I personally argue, don't want to put words in the host's mouth here, um, but it's rare, but it does happen, and when it happens, it sucks. In this case, it sucks bad for both sides, real bad. Yeah, it is real. It does happen. And when it does, it's a terrible experience for certainly both players at the table this time. Sometimes only one player at the table. And it's too bad because I think it does. There's a little bit of confirmation bias that gets established there when like, oh look, here we go again. Someone's cheating at the table, and there's a lot that we can talk about with the specifics of this one. But yeah, just because it happens doesn't mean it happens all the time. That is not to diminish the fact that this probably did happen.
I agree.
So yeah.
It probably did happen. I can't say for sure because I wasn't there. But the video, it looks really bad.
So there's a thing called Menraya, which is a legal term I googled once, and I guess that's the idea in law of calculation of intent and purposefully doing it. I think I used a lot of sporting analogies in the last episode when talking about cheating and how to conceptualize it. And I'd like to get to the point where, whether or not it was intended doesn't really matter if fouls are committed, right? And I think that's part of it. Like, I think one of the worst parts of this, even assuming that this guy did everything that everyone says he did, and it's on camera, he definitely rolls too many dice. He definitely says things happened when he rolled behind some terrain. That didn't happen. He definitely doesn't bring off enough models. He misplays a model. He miscounts how many wounds are on one of his very key models. Doesn't die critically. Like there are, there's a lot of errors that favor one of the players, and so that was considered to be enough of a pattern to assume that he intended to cheat. Look, I don't want to drag the guy down any more than he already has been. There's plenty of Reddit threads. If you really want to see how people feel about this, they're not very happy. But all that being said, I don't think it really necessarily matters. What matters is the fact that those things did happen. They're on camera. So what are the consequences of those things happening? I think is really the question.
Um, I've been kind of vocal about the backlash on the individual, right?
Yeah.
I be nice, roll dice to me is very important. And even if somebody cheated at a dice game, it doesn't call for online bullying. It doesn't call for death threats or anything like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just a game. Somebody messed up, and somebody is now paying the consequences for that mess up. And I think as bad as the cheating looks on the competitive community, I think also the way that people are treating this player, it looks very bad on the competitive community as well. So, what were your
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, I couldn't agree with that more. There's two sides of this coin. One is how can you care so much about playing with quote, and I'm quoting you here, war dollies, that you would cheat on camera in a game to win at war dollies. And on the flip side of that, how can people care so much about someone's actions playing fundamentally a meaningless game to make threats on that person and to say a lot of terrible things and jump to a lot of conclusions about that person. And yeah, I think honestly, like if we do stuff in the public realm, we do open ourselves up to criticism and sometimes real hostile language. I think that is the internet age we live in. But again, it doesn't look well upon the community. And I think a lot of it maybe has to do with the fact that there is a perception. I might disagree how accurate it is that there is a lot of this type of stuff that goes on, and there are never any consequences for it. And so I think that leads to a lot of frustration from people who just are upset that someone could do something like that in a game. Really, any game, like it's just a bit silly. But I think the sort of grossness of the I would say overreaction is unfounded and unwarranted and kind of I don't know overshadows the gravity of the offense that even occurred, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's more than a little bit problematic. And again, that is not to understate the fact that this stuff happened, needs to be dealt with as a community. But again, threatening a person, like the Reddit thread was locked as because one of the moderators said that the person was starting to receive threats. And there's a lot of vitriol just on that thread itself. Again, it's a public sphere. That stuff's going to happen. This is the internet. We are all adults. It does happen, but one would hope that um, it doesn't need to get that ugly.
Hmm. Hmm. So, we sort of talked about it. We agree that some shady shit did happen. Um, there were some consequences that came down on this particular player. Um, so he was suspended from playing games in that circuit for 30 days, I think it was.
There's a 30-day suspension, yellow card at the next event, and a 0 for that event. Was what the Northeast Circuit came to a conclusion of. Northeast Circuit, this is in the northeastern United States. Speaking of which, if anyone from there is watching, why not come on up to Canada? Let's get a little northeast circuit going. But yeah, so that group includes some pretty esteemed TOs, including the folks that run Battle for Salvation, which is probably one of the more competitive tournaments that exists in the United States. And Dom, the TO there, that actually ran this event and streamed this event. They reviewed it and came to the conclusion that that was sort of the best the harshest sanction that they wanted to dole out, and that was actually based on reflection too, with the code of conduct, and also I think in the spirit of probably a first time offense. I think certainly documented anyway, um, and so that was what they decided to do. Yes.
I think, like for me, that felt right. The yellow card going into your next event feels right. It's saying like we're watching you play clean. A lot of people are, well, I guess we could get into what else has happened as um, I guess consequences. Do you think that what the TOs decided? Do you think that was sufficient?
Question.
Yes.
I think so. First of all, it zeroed out on the event. Absolutely, I think
Yep.
that's good. That needs to happen. You need to take a time out and think about what you have done. Also good. And the yellow card coming in the next event, meaning short leash. I don't know in the Northeast if they do one yellow, the next one's a red. Some places do that. A lot of places it's two yellows, like in soccer, then a red. So one yellow is basically a pretty firm warning. You're on thin ice, bud, as they say up here. Uh, but on the other hand, so we have something to weigh against this, which is things have been happening pretty much in a COVID-19 vacuum. Every one of these tiny events that have happened so far are under extreme microscopes. And there has unfortunately been some drama coming out of very little tournament activity featuring some pretty notable players. And I guess no reason to recap all the stuff that's gone on, but it's really one other event, and it wasn't a situation like this. But nonetheless, it did seem kind of shady, at the very least inappropriate. And so I think from a ITC perspective, having the person in pole position, embroiled in something like this, going into the triumphant return of competitive play, it may have just been a judgment call that they had to do something to show that they care about this, and that this is not the type of behavior that they will accept. So the result is that the ITC didn't name the player, but nonetheless, that player, their score is zeroed out for the year, and they will not be able to accrue any ITC points for the remainder of this season. So the ITC is not a sanctioning body. It is not a thing that actually can make any decrees, but they do control the point system, and they do control their own events. So from their side of things, what they could say is, okay, if other TOs want to allow this player to play, that's fine, but he will not be scoring any more ITC points this year. Just an interesting way to do it, and fairly harsh for this particular person. But again, if people deem that mens rea was there, and that this was a clear intention to cheat by lying about dice results, rolling behind terrain. At the end of last episode, literally, we almost signed up. We almost signed off, and I thought, oh, and by the way, the most basic thing is don't let people roll dice behind terrain, and that's what was happening here. He's rolling
Yep.
out of sight,
If they would have just watched our video on the way to the venue.
right? But also the fact that he was rolling out of sight adds that layer of suspicion,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it adds that adds that. Oh well, he was rolling behind that terrain because he didn't want the other player to see
And
what
the
his dice
TO
were.
did say that there was dice boxes provided and that they were encouraged to roll in the dice trays. So,
Which, interesting enough, would have been off camera, so we wouldn't have seen any of it.
um,
But
however, the opponent would have seen it.
potentially, I think there's to crib from other stuff like risk assessments and like loss prevention. One of the key things is making stuff not easy to do, right? So you're not going to put like your cabinet of Rolexes by the door. You're probably going to put it at the back of the store and lock that cabinet. So that way someone walking by it and is like, you know what? I wouldn't normally steal this, but I will.
Yeah.
So like we can do things, I think, to set it up so that there is less opportunity for someone to even try this stuff. For example, like a really good example of this would be like one of the other previous things that certainly is a form of cheating that just sort of accepted was slow play. So someone taking way too long to play their turn, eating up all of the time. The other person doesn't get enough time to play their side of the game. Game ends in one, two, well, usually two, maybe three turns, and that favors the person who controlled and hogged the clock. We put in chess clocks in very competitive. Like generally speaking, it only happens at day two of tournaments where undefeated players need to play on a chess clock. But what that does is it evenly splits the time. It takes away the opportunity, purposefully or not, because a lot of people slow play not intentionally. They, like myself, they're just not playing fast enough. But now they have their half of the clock, they have their half of the time, and it's fair, right? And so I think from this we can learn, you know what? Most of the time people can probably roll wherever they want, but when games actually matter, when there's some stakes on the line, we should be using dice boxes, and making sure that each opponent is able to clearly see the dice that are being rolled. So there's not the potential for someone to have to just trust their opponent or call their opponent out for rolling behind terrain. So we can do stuff like that, which I think is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We can also, and there's also personal responsibility here too. We can also not roll behind terrain and say the wrong things, that like not say what the dice actually rolled. That's something we can do too.
I also, for like really critical rolls and stuff like that, I like to roll it out in front, but I also, if I'm rolling 40 shots from a Punisher Lehman Russ, I will sometimes ask my opponent to help me with it, right? Or at least watch while I do it, because that's a lot of dice and I just don't want to make any mistakes. It's okay to ask your opponent to help or to watch.
That's one thing about this. Again, that makes that intention a little more cloudy, or a little less cloudy, perhaps. Is the fact it's very low volumes of dice. We're talking about 4 dice on one, 6 dice on another.
Hmm.
It's not a lot of dice to keep track of. This wasn't a bucket that he was dropping down and he picked up some ones and twos that he shouldn't have. Right? Like these were small rolls, that most people would struggle to believe that they were misread.
Yeah.
So I can see how the people have concluded what they concluded for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you think that the 0 points for the year from the ITC? Do you think that that's too harsh? Do you think that's not harsh enough? It's definitely precedent setting because I don't think they've ever done this before.
I think that's accurate. At least not a public one. I don't know that there's been a public reaction like this. And I think that's one of the challenges of the fact that essentially competitive 40K is an unsanctioned system. With the GT tournament pack that Games Workshop released, we now have a common rule set, at least, that we all operate by. But there are no floor rules. Like there are no true conventions on how to play the game fairly, because it's assumed that everyone knows how to do that. Um, and yes, this is an extreme example, but no, it's not necessarily obvious to everyone. And this again was interesting during the chess clock debate when it was before it was sort of widely accepted. It wasn't obvious to everyone that both players should get an even amount of time. Like that was actually something that was argued about. And perhaps there would be some issue had with both players having to use a dice tray, or each have their own dice tray because COVID and such.
Hmm.
But whatever that solution is, right? So I don't know. The lack of a sanctioning body means that there is no overarching authority to often make these calls, and also there's no necessary way for this player to get their day in court. As tonight, we're recording on Saturday night, and I don't think we've heard from them at this point. Again, understandable that it's been pretty rough out there.
Hmm.
And yeah, so like there have been a lot of consequences, but there are concepts such as natural justice. Even people who have very obviously broken laws get their day to defend themselves, or not, or to say, you know what, I did what I did. I accept the consequences and show contrition, right? So those things aren't able to happen because we don't have those systems set up, and that's, I hope, every time we have one of these sort of high profile situations where like a known player uh, does something offside on a streamed game, and it has happened before. We were on a pretty good run there, but it has happened before. It often has spurned forward some, I would say, evolution in how we do things. That's where chess clocks come from. That's where the code of conduct comes from. And now perhaps we'll see some coordination between TOs and some calibration too on what is an appropriate sanction. How long should players be forced to sit out if they should at all, and sharing of information as well, so that if a player is red carded or banned from one area, that other TOs are aware of it. So it's interesting. There's a lot of these regional circuits that are starting to pop up. I think there's Texas, there's the Midwest one used to be called the Grand Marshal, and now the Northeast one. Um, there's circuits of events, sometimes featuring fairly large ones, but I think perhaps what we'll see is a little bit more of a grassroots thing where these local groups will start enforcing some form of floor rules and consequences for players that cheat or break significant rules, or things outside the game too that are inappropriate that can get someone bounced. And so maybe there'll be a little bit more cooperation, coordination, and again, more obvious consequences for doing this kind of stuff.
I found it really interesting that a lot of people were asking for a lifetime ban.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't put themselves in the shoes of others, right? A lifetime ban says that you don't think, one, that you know that it was intentional, and two, the most important thing, that you don't think people can change. And I think if I made a mistake, I would definitely want the chance to prove that I've changed, right? And lifetime ban doesn't allow that. Um, all these knee jerk reactions, like, where do you think they come from? Like, why do people get so worked up about it?
It's a common thing. I mean, this is not unique to 40K at all. I mean, people really enjoy the moral high ground, and they tend to savor it when they think they have it. Right? I think that's not a. Again, I think empathy is required on all sides. I kind of understand that kind of behavior, especially if it reinforces a preconceived notion that you had about the conduct of people who play competitive 40K. If you think we're all scumbags and that we're cheating constantly, something like this reinforces that. Aha, throw the book at them because they're all cheaters and they need to be held to account. Well, I think that's a bunch of nonsense. So,
I
that being
feel
said,
I
go ahead.
feel like this particular instance, it got, I mean, all the other instances as well get a lot of the knee jerk reaction, but for me it seems like this particular instance was, the response was a lot more harsh, and I'm wondering, is it because of who the person in question is?
Maybe. I mean, like, so the player is fairly well known. I interviewed him a bunch of times on my on our show, Stat Center. One of my favorite guys to interview. One of my favorite guys to see at a tournament. Right. So I think that needs to be said.
Hmm.
Personally, this guy is I've met him a number of times. Never took my wallet. And I never really had the intention, the impression that he was a quote shady player. I've never had that impression. So no, a lifetime ban is not appropriate. I think if there was a consistent and documented pattern of behavior, we are talking about one turn as well. We didn't even necessarily document and pattern that behavior throughout that entire game. At least I haven't seen that.
Yeah, like
So
not even through the entire game, let alone all the other games that he's been at top tables on streams for
multiple
years.
times.
Yeah, for
Yes, many times.
years.
And who knows? Maybe there'll be a super cut of all the times this guy's done shady shit. I have no idea. I don't encourage it. I think that there's certainly enough consequences already been enacted that I suspect if this player does decide to keep playing Warhammer, and I hope he
Which I
does
hope he
in the future,
does. I hope he does. Yeah.
um, that more than enough incentive to probably play in his tidy whities, in a glass box and make sure that everyone can see what he's doing at all times. I don't. I would suspect that the day not that long from now, the next ITC season, which will be a more interesting one to participate in anyway, that this player will probably not run into this stuff again. I would hope. Although he's gonna deal with it for as long as he's on the scene, probably, or until yeah. It's an unfortunate thing in that respect.
Hmm. Hmm. So we kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, where does the ITC go from here? Like, does it mandate that you use dice boxes? Does it mandate that you use certain dice? Like,
So so the ITC itself, all they really do is they keep points, right? So they have the ranking and they have their own events. So Frontline Gaming also runs its own events for which they have rules packets that other people can follow. Essentially, they are
mhm.
a model, right? So I'll be interested to see. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and they have the code of conduct.
They have the code of conduct, but
Yeah.
none of those things are mandatory, and
Hmm.
obviously they couldn't decree anything anyway. And it's not their style to do so. They're very much uh, have been a cooperative in the sense that yeah, they might do things a certain way, but they've always encouraged that tournament organizers out there, they can follow their lead or they can do their own thing. Really, all that matters is that events are happening and growing, and hey, there's this cool ranking system you can participate in. It gets people pretty excited and fired up to play. Um, that's kind of what the Frontline Gaming and ITC guys are all about, and it's been a really good way to grow the game. It's possible that we're at the stage where we need a version of the ITC that is impartial, and like an actual organization dedicated to sanctioning events. So saying like, you go to this event, it is going to meet a certain level of quality, to handling things like discipline of players and rules about how to actually play the game. So there's playing the game, but there's also what's the conduct and floor rules around playing it. A lot of people are really resistant to these concepts, but it's actually kind of cute how how basic 40K is as a game played competitively. If you were to go to even the most, to me, like basic collectible card game tournament, like there are very like detailed rules about conduct to play that game, like, and it's accepted that, like, yeah, obviously I got to do this. When you go to the analogy I love to do, like, I've done one 5K race in my life. And I did it a couple years ago. There's a 5K race through my local zoo. Half the people were dressed like Batman, the other half were like me, quite out of shape. But I had to sign waivers. I had to, pay my entrance fee. I had to wear my penny, go to the right paddock, set myself up in the right sort of zone, so that way I was racing against people of similar, very low quality. Um, and so like it was a fun run. No serious marathon runner was showing up there that day. No one flew in from Kenya, like the big marathon in Toronto. Like people come from all over the world to race in that race. It's for serious, but we still followed the same rules that you'd have to follow if you were to run in that big marathon.
It's
That's not absurd.
it's the same with roller derby. In order to even put skates on, you have to have insurance, have an insurance card, which I think they might have gotten rid of. I've been out of it for a few years now. They might have gotten rid of the insurance card, but you used to have an insurance card, and then you'd have to have a jersey that had your name and your number on it, but the name and number had to be a certain size on the jersey, and
Yeah,
and yeah, and your names had to pass, because roller derby names can be quite vulgar sometimes, so they had to like pass through the refs, and there's like all these things that you need to do just to put skates on, not even
yeah.
to play, just to put your skates on.
And I
um
think so. Like, this comes back to, I think, a point that a lot of people make, which is how could this happen? Why can't they just have fun? Why can't they just play games? And sorry, guys, but human beings, when there is any stakes, sometimes when there aren't even
it's
any
just
stakes,
bragging rights. That's the only stakes that
if
there
it's
needs
just
to be.
fragrant, like friendships have been ended over like how many packets of sugar can you eat? Like, it is we're weird monkeys. Like, we are
Yeah.
very strange ape creatures, and when we're all chasing the same cookie, We do crazy things. This is not something to be surprised about. This is not something to be disgusted by. This is just the way monkeys are. And some of us are better at it, and some of us are nicer monkeys than others. And even some of the mean monkeys, they can realize, I got a little caught up in that. I'm sorry. I'm going to take the time out that I have to take. I'll come back next time and be a better person.
Better
So,
monkey.
like, better monkey. And look, like every stop sign you stop at is probably there because an accident happened, right? Like we learn things the hard way as a species, right? So I think every one of these that happens again, and I hope it causes an evolution to realize that okay, we just need to agree to certain rules of conduct, so that way, everyone's rolling. We know that if someone rolls behind terrain, that dice doesn't count. If it's outside of the box, it doesn't count. That could be a very simple rule that solves a lot of problems. We could have a not for profit group of volunteers who just provide a good structure for people to follow, and so that way too, when this kind of stuff happens, there's a due process. Like that's why you have due process, so that way you don't have some people who would say, he didn't mean it, let him go. And the other people are like, string him up.
Oh.
You know, there's like, actually, guys, that's not appropriate. That's too lighthearted. That's really not appropriate. This is what we've decided is the right way to go. It's the fair way. And then people realize that there is consequence to people who to bad actors. I think that's another reason why the reaction is so vitriolic, is that they feel like this happens all the time and no one ever gets punished for it. Well, in order to do that, you need to take it a bit more seriously and have the systems in place to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. I still stand by my original thought that it doesn't actually happen that often.
Of course not. But
Yeah.
the person. So first of all, like I know I don't like. Look, I know for sure I could roll the wrong amount of dice. I
Yeah.
know for sure I could do that. I gave the example in the last show about get shots on my Tau commanders. Like that is a very similar scenario there.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps if I screw that up, I should suffer some form of penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there would be a convention that said like, hey, if you do something wrong there, then you forfeit that round of shooting. Whatever it is, there should probably be some way to make it so that when people make mistakes in a competitive setting, in a place where you're trying to win a cookie at the end of the day,
It's not even a cookie.
um, it's probably not even a cookie. Like your like Dusty Payton set, or whatever the prize support is. Um, but but even then, like the stakes are getting higher. They will continue to be elevated, especially if I have anything to say about it. I want to make the broadcast of these things bigger. I want to see more eyeballs paying attention. I want people to get excited about the biggest names in 40K playing each other, and the narratives of the people who work super hard. This player, no doubt about it, works super hard at being good at this game, right? Um, there's no question there about that. So I would like to see those people who develop skills also don't get embroiled in cheating scenarios, ideally. But I would like to see, like these characters and people see this as a game that's worth being good at. And in order to do that, you need to have ways to make sure that the credibility and legitimacy of the game is protected. And I think we probably need to evolve to ensure that.
So then so you said that it should be like a non-profit volunteer kind of thing.
Yeah,
Somebody just says
throwing that out
no
there.
stakes in it whatsoever.
Well, I figure I could, start it and then we can, just really slowly start collecting dues, and then you just sort of keep raising the dues, and then I can get my salary up a little bit so I'm nice and comfortable, and then move to Puerto Rico or Costa Rica or something. Yeah, I think that would probably work. But yeah, no,
But the rules though.
I think I'm spitballing that just as the idea of like an independent organization that is there simply as an arbiter, right? Because I'm sure this is not something Games Workshop necessarily wants to be involved in. I'm not sure about that, but I get the impression that they have a different view on conduct. But nonetheless, it's a risk for them too, I would think. You don't want The idea that everyone who plays your game is a tryhard to be, like associated with your brand. So they probably, if they're listening, might consider, how do you deal with player conduct? Um, and they if they were to step into the arena and say, here's how we believe players should comport themselves. Here's how you can play a fair game and make sure it's a fair game. Here are the different techniques you can do. That would go a long way, I'm sure. They probably don't want to be doing the DCI thing like with like Magic does, which is a very serious. You have like your number and your offenses and penalties and all kinds of stuff follow and are associated with you as you play. They probably don't want to manage something like that, and that is the type of system that you will probably get into the scale where you want to have it. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, like Magic the Gathering. I was talking with Pablo Martinez of Chapter Tactics, uh, and he's a he was a big Magic player. I think he still really likes it. He still gets out for various Magic events, and he sort of sparked me to go and look at the evolution of Magic the Gathering as a competitive game. And the difference there from, say, Games Workshop is they viewed tournaments and competitive play as a really good way to grow their fan base and to get people excited to play the game, buy more stuff, and all that kind of. They viewed it as a central engine to their product, their company. And what I found very interesting is when they realized that, the first thing they did was they created a I don't know if they call them judges or referees, but they created a system to train referees and judges for
Hmm.
Magic. That was the first thing they did, which I found pretty fascinating. They knew, but like they're like, okay, we're gonna have a Magic tournament thing that we're gonna be doing, and this is before they had pro players and all that kind of stuff. We know we want to do that. First thing we need actual rules of how to play the game, how to conduct yourselves when you're playing this game, so that you can keep it fair. Because ultimately, what it comes down to for me is protecting the players. To make sure that the people on Reddit who are like, well, I was thinking about going to a tournament, but gee willikers, I'm not going now.
And that's
First,
happening
first
a
of all,
lot.
which is unfortunate.
Yep.
And I don't know why when I yell and scream about how awesome tournaments are, that doesn't gain any traction. But
Same,
one
right?
one 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 bumpkin tournament, not bumpkin tournament, sorry, Dom, but nonetheless, small event. One
It's okay,
small
he's not
event,
watching this anyway. It's fine.
a little. It's on my watch. One small event, a little light case of maybe, probably, definitely cheating, and everything's out the window. But also, like that's a thing, like that we have to be concerned of as a community, and that's where personal responsibility comes from. Is that like if you think that you may have done something untoward that gave you an unfair advantage, you can also throw yourself on the sword and say, "Hey, I screwed that up."
Hmm.
There are games like Ultimate Frisbee and most famously golf. Golf is completely self-called. So, like, if you make a penalty, if you do something that's against the rules of golf in golf, it's your duty to penalize yourself appropriately. If you, at the end of the game, sign a scorecard that doesn't have all of the correct penalties on it, and it's the wrong score, you get a 0 for your tournament. That's it, and you get DQ'd. Probably what should have happened here.
Hmm.
Um, and it did happen here. But you don't necessarily get pilloried and ripped apart for like signing the wrong card. You signed the wrong card. If that was your attempt to cheat, well, that was pretty stupid because you got busted. You lose your weekend, and I'm sure if you did it a bunch of times, you wouldn't be much of a pro golfer.
Hmm.
Um, Interesting too. Little side note: this scenario of people watching from home and pointing out mistakes and errors and potential cheating, um, calling it into the people on the ground was a big scandal in golf, like probably 10, 15 years ago. Because should people who are watching the game from afar have anything to do with what's actually happening on the course? And I actually don't know how they resolved it. But
How do you feel about that?
I feel like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, if someone can spot something that's actually a misplay, the issue is that a lot of the times, and I would say more often than not, people watching from home think they saw something and they're
Hmm.
wrong.
There's
right?
also
This
a lot
wasn't
of armchair generals out there.
Yeah, and that happens a lot in Warhammer streams where they think they saw something and they're totally wrong.
Mhm.
Like for example, there's an English player who was in the finals at the LVO, not last time, but the time before, and he's got a bad rap. And that person was, basically had a judge at their table all the way through the tournament. So like this person was under a microscope, and honestly, as far as I know, aside from one person we know very well, had a pretty rough experience with him. Um, Played a pretty good tournament, and in the final round, moved his opponent's model because he was asked to by his opponent on the camera. You don't know that,
Yeah.
and so everyone was like cheater and like just ripping into this guy. When in fact he was told to do it, if I'm not mistaken, actually it was by the head judge. So anyway, there's stuff where and also like there's stuff where the audience thinks they know but they don't know, and that can be problematic. But at a minimum, them calling it out might find something that was a foul, and it's on the judges to check it out, and that's fine.
Hmm. I feel like it was really cool taking part in the Las Vegas Open to see the the stream like the chat stream come in and people are asking questions or like, oh, I think that they forgot that or right, because people are playing lists and factions that they don't normally play, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that that's absolutely fine, especially when you have a chat moderator who is familiar with the lists and the faction and all that, who can wade through everything to find the bits and pieces that are legitimate and not just people talking out their ass.
Yeah, and the Nopen was particularly fascinating because of how seriously people took what was a series of exhibition games, and and in that context accused people of cheating, which was a bit much for me. So I think
Yeah.
like there's personal responsibility on all sides here.
Yes.
First of all, if it's a genuine, like I can't stress this enough, if it's a genuine example of someone cheating at 40K, that person again should suffer a penalty that is appropriate, no doubt about it. But also, people watching games of 40K, people responding to other people talking about something that they think they saw while watching people play 40K. These people need to chill the f out and just make sure that they have their facts straight before they drag someone's name through the mud, before they make someone feel bad, um, because there's a good chance you don't know what you're looking at.
Mhm.
Yeah, and but it's the internet. Come on, it's the internet.
I
People,
know.
people. Let's not. We all lost our innocence a very long time ago. People are going to be rough and rude on the internet. It's going to happen. I think it behooves all of us who are perhaps not as caught up emotionally to try and act as rational people, calm things down wherever we can, speak out against awfulness where we can. Um, but yeah, I mean, just like there are cheaters and it makes the game a bad experience at times. There are also this is news. You might put this in the name of the episode, but there's assholes on the internet and they're mean.
But you know what? There's a lot of absolutely wonderful people who play Warhammer 40K at the top levels.
Yes.
And I just really, really want to. I don't know, we're probably calling the episode here pretty quick, but I just want to really encourage people. If you've ever thought about playing in a tournament, and this is coming from somebody who sucks, okay? Like I have like a 2 wins, 3 loss kind of like record going on here at tournaments. Um, as somebody who sucks at the game, I highly recommend that you do try going to a tournament because you will meet some of the most fantastic humans that you've ever met in your entire life. And please do not let a few instances of people making really stupid choices color how you see competitive Warhammer.
Yeah.
Please.
And rob you of the chance of getting to hang out with those people
Yeah.
because And also for those of us who are terrible at Warhammer, and I like to call myself also terrible at Warhammer.
High five.
I got to win the points anyway for an ITC major many years ago because the guy who won it had a list error and got DQ'd for his ITC points. So sometimes, and people called him a cheater. He wasn't a cheater. He just messed up what relic he was allowed to use. I know the guy. He's a wonderful human being. Well, I mean, that's maybe a bit far, but I like him a lot.
He's all right.
The fact whether or not I like it is not necessarily a comment on the quality of your person, but nonetheless, that person, because I got DQ'd, I got to be in first. I have no right to that. But hey, it happened because someone quote cheated. This guy won. So maybe cheating in certain circumstances for us middle table warriors beneficial. Maybe it's a good thing as long as they're caught and DQ'd. That's a hot take.
So if you suck at Warhammer, you should want there to be a governing body that can come through and issue fouls.
I can just spot the people in front of you.
But not you,
DQ.
Because you as a middle table player are perfect at this game, right?
Definitely not screwing up all kinds of stuff.
You never make mistakes.
Not this guy.
You never forget about Gets Hot.
Nope. Oh man, and so many other things.
I know.
But yeah, so I think there's a lot of bummerness coming out of this, and especially since this has been a year of bummers, like real life-ish bummers, and it'd be great if we could avoid them when hopefully we're on the cusp of a triumphant return of tabletop 40K. So yeah, let's just be excited about tournaments happening again. Let's be excited about people playing properly, and when they don't, that the appropriate thing happens. I think that's something to be pretty okay with.
And get excited to make friends at tournaments.
Yes,
because that's the best part of tournaments. Honestly, cheeseball as it is, making friends.
The 40K tournament podcast bingo card needs to have like community as the center square.
Everybody just automatically gets to dab it.
Just community. You could do a community supercut, and you would just be barfing within 30 seconds. It's about the community. My number one favorite thing about this is it's the community.
It's the hobby community.
That's the same community that's done some pretty poisonous, crazy whack stuff. So just like anyone else or anything else in your life that you love, weird, terrible things can happen. And we just have to learn to forgive.
But not
forget. You want to bring it up in passing
all the time.
At a later time. But you do move on, and we do come back from this stronger, and I think ultimately that will be what happens here.
I think so as well.
And also for the player involved as well, I think.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna call it there. As always, people, be nice, roll dice, and don't cheat.
Where you can see them.
Yes, roll dice where you can see them. All right. Hopefully you don't have to come back next week too. I mean, you can if you want, but hopefully it's not for cheating.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Maybe I'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks, I want to know, were we wrong? Is cheating commonplace in competitive Warhammer 40K? And will this event keep you from participating in future tournaments? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that bell for notifications, and share this with your friends. As always, I stream twice a week on Twitch. I do daily updates to Instagram. I am a co-host on Forge the Narrative, and I write articles for Goonhammer. So make sure to check me out at all those places. And until next time, everybody, be nice and roll dice. And don't cheat.